Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good evening. This is Doug Cook. I am your host for tonight. I'm the Education Events Coordinator for NOFA Mass. Along with me is Anna Gilbert Muhammad, our Food Access and Webinar Coordinator. And before we get started, I'd just like to thank all of the NOFA Mass board and staff who've contributed to the production of this webinar, which is the fourth in a series of free resiliency skills online gatherings, as well as a big thanks to our sponsors, Black Earth Compost. They're based in the northeast part of the state, and their mission is to collect food waste and turn it into a source of fertility for Massachusetts. Most importantly, we want to thank you, the viewers and listeners, especially our members who make our education and advocacy work possible. If you find this event useful and inspiring, please become a NOFA Mass member or make a donation to support our important work at this time. I'd like to introduce Kirby Lecy, who is a small farmer and chicken wrangler with 15 plus years of working on food access, farming advocacy, and rural challenges.
All right, perfect. So hi, everybody. This is just a really awesome opportunity to be able to chat with everybody about chickens, which is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about. I have been raising flocks of different sizes for a number of years, and I am just really thrilled to kind of share some of the things that I wish I had known. I have to be honest, I've had a really challenging and tough week. We here on the farm have a new puppy and have piglets, and all of that has been a little bit challenging. So it feels really good tonight to be able to be here and talk about something that is just a little bit more familiar to me. So as I said, I'm here. I have a small farm. It's my passion. It's something that I wanted to do for my entire life, and I'm so excited that we've been able to bring that to fruition. In my day job, I work for the Department of Public Health in the State Office of Rural Health. So I'd be remiss to not say that, it's been a challenging couple of months working through the pandemic, and I think that these types of webinars and resiliency skills are just so important in so many ways to highlight the ways that we can rely more on ourselves and also on our smaller food systems within our local communities that can really hold us up when things begin to happen. So I was also I'm born and raised in the North Quabbin area of the state, and that's just a place that's near and dear to my heart. And we're located here in Ashburnham now, so we've got like a toe towards that way. And I think we're just going to have a really good time today and kind of run through a number of topics. So we're going to really get into kind of a little bit of everything. And so I really do encourage folks to ask questions as we go along, because I'm going to try and hit all of the different topics. But if there are things you'd like me to get a little bit deeper in, I'd be happy to, given the time. And I'll have my contact information at the end. So if there's things you want to follow up about, please feel free to do so. We're going to talk about housing and fencing and feed, how we care for our chicks, how we keep them healthy, dealing with poop and roosters, and just making the most of having chickens. And so the reason that I really love chickens is that I think that they are probably one of the most hardworking animals that you can have on a small homestead, a farm, a backyard, because they are able to do a whole lot for us. We can use them to turn compost and convert food waste. They help with our bug populations and ticks. They're a pet that we have that you feed, and you get wonderful protein from them every day. And for me, I think too, the other piece is that they provide me just a lot of joy and entertainment at the end of the day. There's nothing I enjoy more than just plopping down next to the coop and watching them, because it does. It kind of chills you out and gets you settled. And as we kind of roll through this, I think my biggest thing that I can say about all of this is that you can never be too prepared in some ways. And I also say that too because after my experience this week with bringing a couple of piglets onto the farm, holy moly, we were not too prepared. And so it makes me think back to how prepared I was the first couple of times that we went into doing poultry and all the things that we really thought about in doing that. So in addition to what I say to you tonight, there are so many places that have information, books and websites and different resources. And what I say tonight, there may be things that you pick up on and say that works for me, and there may be things that maybe aren't going to work for you. And so I just want to encourage folks that that's okay. You got to find what's going to work for your space, for your time commitment, for your where you're at with things, and hopefully you'll be able to see that anything you're doing, you can kind of scale up and scale down with a lot of other stuff. Okay. So the first thing we're going to get into is housing. And so I'm going to actually show a quick video if it works okay. If it's sloggy, I'm just stopping it and we're going to move forward. And this video is not of the coop that you see the picture of here right now, which is our main coop, which you're going to see a lot of photos of coming up. But it's of a small mobile coop that we use for our geese. Just to give you an idea of kind of the different scales that you can utilize with chickens. And so let's see if this plays. It's going to be sloggy. Yep, we're backing out. So you can see here, I'll just show the image for right now. And so this is a small mobile A-frame coop that we have. And we utilize this for our geese to be able to move them around. They spend a lot of time free ranging here, but you could absolutely utilize this for chickens. On the end here, you see there's two boards that are sticking out, and those make it nice and easy to prop this up on the wheels that are on the back and roll. Where you see this can that's on the backhand side, if you were to move that can, this whole back end flips open on a big hinge so that it's easy to be able to get in and access and clean. We've got some plywood down where the straw is, so that would be an area that, if you had chickens, they could nest in there, and it would be really easy to kind of throw a roost in there for chickens to roost on. And then we've got hardware cloth surrounding this to kind of keep them safe. And so this is going to get into a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about with the housing and the way that things you need to think about. So it's really important to just have a basic understanding of what your space requirements are and how you're going to build so that you're making sure that you manage your snow loads or ventilation. It doesn't matter if your coop is this size or if your coop is like our small A-frame area. I really like the A-frame style because it's easy to be able to pop tarps onto or metal sheeting if I need to. And because of the pitch of it, it really allows for the snow to be able to fall off of it. It's easy to build vents to have lots of proper ventilation in them. And it really does kind of give you a nice versatile way to be able to move coops around. And so you'll see a lot in our design here because we're a farm that does not have machinery. We're not able to have a big mobile coop that we drag around to new spaces. So we really had to design our stuff here for us to be able to kind of keep our coop stagnant, but be able to move our chickens where we needed to. The other thing that I think is really important, no matter what the size of your coop is how you access the different areas of it. I will tell you, there is nothing fun about crouching in a bunch of chicken poop, trying to scrape it out when you don't fit. And so, no matter the size, having sides or doors that you're able to access and get into is so important. We have a full-size door so that I can get in the coop. The coop is full-size so I can walk around in it. But what you see right here in this picture on the right-hand side is a door that we have access to our poop trays. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we get a little further on. And the poop trays sit underneath the roost. So it's where chickens do the most of their droppings. And so we are able to pop this door open and slide those trays out, and about 15 feet from here is where my compost is, to be able to pull those in. And it just makes life a lot easier, so that I'm not trying to wrangle things in and out, while I'm trying to get that stuff clean, because that's one of the areas you're going to be cleaning the most. We also made sure that we had lots of access to be able to get our eggs, so that we didn't have to go into the coop. And so you'll see here we have these two doors that flip open from the front side of our coop, that allows us to be able to get into our nesting boxes, which are inside. Sometimes you'll see designs where the nesting boxes kind of sit protruding out from the coop. And that's really great to do if you have limited space inside your coop, so it helps give you some extra square footage. Because we have such a large walk-in coop, that wasn't something that we needed to worry about. So just from a design standpoint, it kept it a little bit easier to keep a clean line in the front of our coop. And then it allows us to really be able to get the eggs and access them without having to go into the coop during the day, which helps you check on things a little more frequently. One of the biggest things that I can say about kind of being prepared for your chickens is really thinking about predator protection. That is going to be your main woe, I think, in keeping chickens, is that it's a hungry world out there, and there are lots of things that are looking for a meal. And keeping your coop safe is so important. And so, as we were building and designing, we did as much as we could to try and help fortify things. So you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, this is the flooring of our coop. And basically what we did is we covered that whole flooring right there with some wire, so that there was a barrier there. You'll see that we dug out around the sides of our coop and put some poultry netting in there to be able to kind of keep that down and safe. And so that helps from predators that are going to dig in, specifically like mice, rats, depending on if you're near water and those kinds of things. Chicken feed brings in a lot of unsavory characters sometimes. So we'll talk a little bit too about making sure you keep all that stuff stored and off the ground, because that helps a lot. But these kind of things help create multiple layers of protection. So even if they get through this wire on the side of the coop and get underneath the coop, then they've got to get through the wire that's in the bottom, and then there's flooring that's in there as well. And so these kinds of things with installing the different poultry wires and nettings really, really help. And if you are going to put investment into anything, don't skimp on these kinds of measures to kind of help keep the chickens safe and prepared. Okay, so you'll see here, I was talking before about our roost set up with our chickens. And so this is in the bottom of our roost here is the trays that we have. And so to this right-hand side here is where that door would pop open so that that tray can slide out. And you'll see here in this photo that it is one single solid tray. It is now two smaller trays, just because I found it much easier to have a little bit of a smaller tray to move along. And, I just want to say, you're going to try things and they're going to work. And sometimes you're going to hone in and find other ways that maybe work a little bit easier. And, be forgiving on yourself. You will find what is going to work best for you. You'll also see here that we have natural logs that we used on our roosting sticks, which was really great, we thought, in the beginning, except that these sticks, unfortunately, when we had a problem with scaly leg mites, were a way for those mites to kind of live. And we also found that the chickens in the wintertime really preferred having 2x4s, because it allowed them to be able to kind of pull their feet up and keep themselves warm, because that's part of how their system works, to be able to keep their bodies warm. And so you'll see here is the poop tray coming out the side from the roof. And this is, there's Bumble, the abominable snowman. We do a whole little thing with him on our farm in the winter. But you'll see in the background how I switched to a dual poop tray and the new roosting sticks that are now in there. The other thing that we did inside our coop, and it's something that I highly recommend, depending on kind of what size you're working with, but anything, is that we whitewashed the inside of our coop. And so whitewash is agricultural lime, okay, so not hydrated lime, it is agricultural lime. And what you do is, this is exactly like the whitewashing you hear about when you're reading old novels about Huck Finn, and you add some water, and some people add salt to it. I've added salt and not added salt because the salt sometimes helps with keeping the paste to stick. I haven't found that to be true. I think it sticks just fine. So basically you add some water to this and get it to a kind of thick, pasty consistency. If you look this up, whitewashing online, there's tons of recipes for it if you want exact. Once you do it once, you kind of understand what the consistency is and you can throw it together. And basically what whitewash does is it helps keep mildew from growing in your coop, and it's caustic and helps with bugs not rooting and keeping their populations in there. And it's really cheap and it's safe for your livestock and animals. So if you're going to paint the inside of your coop because you want it to look fresh and clean, that's all well and good, but your chickens are going to scratch that, they're going to peck at it, and they're going to eat it. And so this stuff is safe to be able to do that. We every season at least do the heavy areas with reapplying this on the floors and in the nesting boxes. And then every other year I kind of do all the surfaces over again. So it just kind of helps keep everything protected. And it's also a little bit of a mildew barrier. So as I said, you know, when you've got all of your chickens in there and they're pooping on the floor, and I'll talk a little bit about the deep litter method that we use in our coop, it just helps with creating a little bit of a barrier to keep moisture out of your wood and things from rotting. So it's a great protectant. It helps, you know, to keep things clean and sanitized and safe. And I'm just a huge fan, and it's cheap. I mean, a huge bag of this stuff is, I think, like $12 now. And we've got a bag that we've had for probably 7 years that we've been using. So I can't say enough about this. I will also say, though, that lime is caustic. So when you are doing this, you really need to make sure that you're wearing appropriate clothing to cover your skin, goggles, that kind of stuff, so that if you get any splatter on you, it doesn't, you know, burn your skin.
Hi, Kirby. We have a question about what is
Great.
the benefit of moving your coop around if you have a small coop to move around?
So the benefit of that is really being able to get your chickens onto fresh grass and area, because you'll find that chickens, and I'll talk a little bit about this too a little later on, they love to scratch and to peck and to look for grubs and bugs, and they are going to rototill whatever area you are putting them in. And so that's all well and good if you've got an area that you don't mind being barren, but if you've got a nice backyard with a lawn and you keep chickens in one area for too long, you can say goodbye to that patch of grass and area. And also, it provides extra foraging for your chickens to be able to have, you know, a more kind of complex diet as well. And, you know, I think there's just, it helps keep things cleaner and healthier when you can move your chickens around, whether that's with netting or with an actual movable coop.
Thanks.
Is there any other questions I can answer right now? Yeah.
Yeah. It's about the type of timber or wood framing that you're using. Is it pressure treated, and would you worry about that leaching into the wood and into your chicken's feed or into the soil?
So we use pressure treated on the actual lumber that we are building the coop with. As far as what's on the floors and the walls, everything I do for that, I keep untreated. That's really personal preference, I have to say. There's lots of folks that think that that's fine and okay. And if that's what's in your prerogative and your budget, great. But that is also why we whitewash, because all of those untreated panels that we're using, those can rot really fast. So, it's just important to know that if you are using untreated wood, which I think is fantastic and a great way to go, you need some sort of barrier protection, and the whitewash does a great job with that.
And another question was about how long does it take for the lime whitewash to dry, and when is it safe for the chickens to go back in there?
It dries really fast. So I would say anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour at most. And we put our birds right back in afterwards, mostly because when you're doing it the first time and you haven't moved your chickens in there, you can take a longer time to get in all the crevices and all the areas. But when I've kicked them all out and they're really angry and upset and making noise at me, I'm trying to get everything kind of done as quick as I can to get them back in. So yeah, it doesn't take long at all.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Let's move on.
Okay, great. And so I talked a little bit about storage. We have an area within our coop that I can access from the outside. So you'll see on the right-hand picture here, which is inside the closet, this door on the left actually opens out into our enclosed run. In front of you is a door that goes into a little back area of our coop that we have that we use to isolate birds in or to brood chickens in. And then the door that you can see on the left-hand side brings you into the closet. So this is where we keep all of our supplies, feed, medical, you name it, so that we can make sure that everyone is healthy and happy and safe and there's quick access to it. You don't want to be hauling things from far away. So, if you've got a small mobile coop, having some sort of a rodent-proof container to keep this stuff in next to your coop is just going to be really helpful. And you'll see here, these are just some pictures from the outside of our coop to see kind of how we've got windows. And as I talked about, there was that little back area where you can see the ladders leaned up against. And so that's just a separate area that we have on the back of our coop for convenience. I will say that when you have birds and a coop, you need to have some sort of a plan, whether that's a dog kennel or something that if a chicken gets sick or hurt or injured, to be able to kind of move them away from the flock. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too as we move along. And so I talked about fencing and I think fencing is probably one of the most important, second most important piece of all of this. I think it goes back to that whole predator protection, which is my number one most important thing, and really how we make sure that our chickens have protection. So no matter what size your coop is, it's important that there's some sort of an enclosed run for them to be able to get into if there's some sort of danger. You will see, like in the A-frame coop, that one end was wide open. And so that's basically an enclosed run for them to be able to go into. It's a safe spot to be able to get out of the way of hawks or other things that may be coming through. And so you'll see here, we have a large run that's enclosed off of one side of our coop. To save a little bit of cash, we used the hardware cloth on the bottom of the coop, which is thinner, and it's where more of your digging sort of predators are going to try and get in. And then for the upper part, we just used welded wire to help keep them still protected and safe, because the welded wire is much cheaper than the hardware cloth is. We also use a series of electric nets to be able to move our chickens. So like I said before, we can't physically move our coop. So we need to have ways for our chickens to get out and about into new areas and into fresh areas. And so we use our nets to make sure that predators are staying out. And for the most part, the birds are staying in where they need to. They learn pretty quick, to be honest, where they need to be safe. And So although birds could fly over this, and I've seen them do it, they typically don't. And I'll say the electric netting, if this is something that you're looking to do for a long time, it's about $250 to get set up with the netting, meaning your energizer and the nets and all of that. But it is well worth it if you have a coop that doesn't have some sort of really solid enclosed area for them to be moving in. Free range chickens are fantastic. But as I said before, it is a hungry world, and it does not take long for predators to kind of find you and sniff you out. So, putting your investment into kind of keeping that stuff safe is going to pay off really big in the long run, because there's nothing more frustrating than having to try and deal with a predator after it's already attacked, because now it knows how to get in, it knows the weaknesses, and you're like 2 steps behind. We have used both Premier and Ken Cove's netting. I like the Ken Cove, except it has these weird nubs on it, so it can be very difficult when you fold it up to get it back apart again. So because of that, we mostly stick with the Premier nets. And because we have multiple flocks that we're moving around, we have a lot of it. But one net is more than sufficient for a small flock of birds. All right, so we're going to get a little bit into feeding. And I think I'm just checking my time. I'm boogieing along. We're doing good. So when we talk about feeding, one of the big things I want to say is it's just important to know what you're feeding your birds. I don't want to get into specifics and debates around who, what, where, and when. NOFA has a great list of feed suppliers, so you can go on their website and check that out. And for us, Green Mountain Feeds, which is part of Poulin's company in Vermont, has just been what we feel comfortable with. They're very transparent about what's in their feed. And I would say that I think our feed makes the difference in kind of our chickens' health and their ability to lay eggs that are incredibly nutritious and delicious. That being said, though, chickens like variety, and so it's not just about the grain that they're going to be getting. That's going to be a small portion. I mean, they eat more grain in the winter, obviously, because there's less for them to kind of access out and about. But they love scratching and pecking and getting at grubs and bugs and you name it out in the yard. And they also really enjoy being able to eat snacks. Those can be your kitchen scraps and waste. It could be stuff that you've purchased, like scraps from the store. There's all kinds of things. We even sometimes give a little treat of spent grain from brewing from one of our friends that does home brewing. They'll bring that over. All of those things are fantastic. And the more variety to the diet you can add, the better. I will say there's like 1,000,001 articles out there about what not to feed your chickens. And I got to be pretty honest, chickens, although people say that the whole term bird brain, they're really intelligent and they have a pretty good understanding of what to put in their body and what not to. You will find out very fast that things that they should not be putting into their body, they won't touch. And those are things like citrus and onions. And there's a lot of articles that are out there, but I would not worry yourself around this kind of stuff because most chickens are not going to eat something that's going to kill them because that would be very counterproductive for them. So although, yes, you should not be putting like a pile of onions in for your chickens, you don't have to be quite as kind of crazy about this when you're moving through. One other thing I'll say about chickens is that water is probably the most important thing that they need all the time, and they need access to it, and it needs to not be frozen in the winter, and the fresher you can keep it in the summer, the better. We use, because we have electricity in our coop, what's popping up over here? No, we don't need that. Okay, so in our coop, we use an electric water heater, which is fantastic. But if you don't have electricity and you're changing out your water, a trick in the winter that you can use is to put a ping pong ball in your waterer. And so that would work best in a pan waterer, not one of these kind of metal waterers. And the ping pong ball creates movement on the surface. So when it's not really, really freezing cold and like 20 below zero, it helps keep the water from freezing, and the chickens often will peck at the ball, and it keeps the ball moving and surface tension going. So that's a little trick there. Chickens do like to drink a lot, and on colder days, they drink even more. So access to water in the winter is very important. You'll see here, I put both the feed and the water up off of the ground because chickens are messy. They like to kick around and scratch things. So when you put things a little bit higher up and with the rocks, it kind of doesn't allow them to get up and into the feed bowls as much. It helps. All right. And so the last kind of big, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few coop questions and fencing questions. One is, what's the dimension of the coop and the run, and how many chickens can live inside the coop?
Okay, so our coop that we have here, this is going to be my math brain. So it's 8 feet by 20 feet inside. And right now we have 34 chickens in there pretty comfortably. You know, I would say that you should probably plan on, for comfort and for movement availability, about 4 square feet per bird. It is movable and comfy. There are a lot of places out there that'll tell you 1 square foot or 2 square foot per bird is good. When you do that, they get overcrowded, and then you have problems with bird health and respiratory issues and all kinds of different things. So that's about the size I would say. Our run, I believe, is 20 feet by 16 feet outside. You can really have any size run that you want, as long as there's some access for them to be able to move around. And our run is bigger because we need our birds because we have more birds, they get it mucky in there much faster than they would if you had 4 chickens or 6 chickens or 12 chickens. So, you know, for the run space, again, I'd say, you know, you're right around that 4 square feet for a bird.
Thanks. And another question has to do with aerial predators. What sort of recommendations for that?
Great. And so that's why I say with the enclosed run. So if you don't have an enclosed run, having anything that you can put out that your birds can get under, so that could even be like a small piece of metal roofing, a piece of plywood on cinder blocks, that's out in the area that they are moving about. Because I will tell you, the only thing that we have actually had real problems with ever in keeping birds is hawks, especially in the winter. You know, because the food supply gets a little bit less, and you know, they look like a nice tasty meal, and I can't blame them. You know, so yes, having anything that your birds can get under, you'll be amazed. They're very observant of what's happening around them, and they learn where they need to go to be safe. So literally, when a hawk flies over, you'll see 30 chickens. They can be up in our back brush of our hill, running down and scooting in through the back part of the coop to get in under this enclosed run. So just having something that they can get under for shelter if you don't have an enclosed run is so important.
Thanks. Let's keep going.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about care for the chickens and things that you need to kind of know and think about. I'll say the number one piece here is really around having access to dust baths for the chickens, and that can be sand, dirt, etc. You'll see here that there is a little box that I've created. Wherever your chickens are, they're going to create their own dust baths. They will dig down and get themselves into the ground. It's how they help keep themselves healthy and clean. It's how they keep bugs off of the shafts of their feathers. And so one thing that we do is we add a little bit of food grade diatomaceous earth into our sandboxes that we have for them to dust bath in. And so diatomaceous earth is really great because it's crushed up shells, and it's used for a lot of different things. But it's wonderful for mite and bug control. It pierces their exoskeletons, and it dries out any sort of bugs that might be on your birds. I will say you need to wear a mask when you're putting this out and down, because the particles are very small and it's not great to inhale them. Once they're in the sand, they don't float into the air, and it's not as much of a problem, but it's a really great kind of natural way to help your chickens keep themselves clean and healthy. The other thing that we do for our chickens is we supplement calcium for them, and we do that with our own eggshells that they have laid. If you were to not pick up eggs underneath a chicken, and they were not to be fertile and to hatch, many of your chickens would eat those eggs. And there's a lot of nutrients there for them. So what we do is we bake our eggshells, and baking the eggshells just helps kill any bacteria that might be on them. We do it in a really low oven at 250 for about 15 minutes. And then we crush them with a rolling pin and put them into a little dish for them. If you don't have a lot of chickens and a ton of eggshells hanging around, you can purchase oyster shells to be able to add it in. It's especially important, I think, in the winter too, just because they're not getting the same nutrients from all of the kind of natural great things out and about. And so I talked a little bit before about the fact that we use a deep litter method in our coop, as well as the poop trays. And so you really need to have a plan for poop. I thought someone was lying when they said that chickens poop like a ton of chicken poop a year per chicken. I don't know if that's really true or not, but I'll tell you, it feels like they do. So, being able to really make sure that you can clean out where they're roosting is going to be most important, because that's where the most of their droppings are going to be. I think having a tray underneath just makes things really easy. I've seen people do slings and hammocks underneath, and those slings and hammocks too are easy to kind of pop out and dump out and clean off and then put back in, so that you're keeping that area clean. For the rest of our coop, what we do is we use straw, wood shavings, whatever you're using for kind of bedding in your coop area. People use all kinds of things, sometimes even dry leaves. You want to get a good base of that in there, about 3 inches. And as the poop and urine and other things accumulate, you add more shavings to it, so that you're keeping a kind of even ratio of that. The big thing is you don't want to smell ammonia. And if you smell ammonia, then you don't have enough kind of material down to be able to allow things to properly compost together. So what ends up happening is, as we're adding all of this brown material and leaves and different things to the poop, you're creating your own compost essentially in the coop. I throw down some scratch and treats in the coop floor sometimes, and the chickens will turn that right over. And then essentially it composts on the floor. It creates nice heat in the winter in your coop to kind of help with your chickens. And then usually about twice a year, we clean it out by shoveling it out the door. And then we've got pretty much half composted poop ready to go into our big compost and flip over. I will say that the last couple of winters has been a little bit challenging to really make it through the whole winter doing the deep litter method for us, because of the wonky fluctuations in temperature and the amount of moisture. And so we did this winter have to clean out one time in the middle. But basically, if you smell ammonia, you need to clean out and start again. The other thing too, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Real quick, what type of sand would you recommend for the sand bath? And do chickens need grit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, the sand that we use is usually like play sand that we get to put into there. You can even use just regular dirt from your yard if you've got a spot that's there. Really anything that they can kind of get into that's soft. And yes, chickens do need grit. So if your chickens are not outside ranging a whole lot, You can purchase grit, which is basically like little rocks and stones for them to be able to help digest the food that's going in. And so if you have baby chicks that you are raising, and I know I haven't talked a lot about baby chicks, and if people have questions about that, we can get to some of that in a few minutes. If you have baby chicks that you're raising and you're going to be putting them out onto a patch of grass for the first time, giving them a little bit of grit ahead of time so that they're able to kind of process and move things through their system is really important. That is how they digest their food. And so, you know, if you don't have outdoor access for your birds, you have to have grit. Yeah. Great question.
Thanks. And in regards to the deep litter, did you say that the deep litter was in the tray under the roost or on the entire floor of the coop?
On the entire floor of the coop. So the trays we clean out about every other day because that is just a lot of heavy poop. If you had 3 or 4 birds, you'd probably be able to get away with doing deep litter in that type of an area as well. With 30 plus birds that we've got in there, there's no way because they're just, it gets completely saturated. We would have to put down so much material on top of that to keep it composting, but we do it in the rest of the coop where they kind of mill about.
And one more question about using your eggshells to introduce, you know, calcium back to the chickens. Can freezing substitute for baking the eggshells to kill bacteria?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure on that. I've always just baked them, so I don't want to say yes, but that's something I can follow up on. You can send me an email. I will find that out. It's very interesting.
Thanks. Let's continue.
Great. Awesome. And so here's just a picture of some roosts and areas we have outside for the chickens to be able to get off the ground. You know, this is important for us, you know, specifically in the winter because we like to get our chickens out and into fresh air, but they really don't like putting their feet on cold, hard ice and snow. And so having roosts in different areas for them to be able to get up off the ground is part of their kind of natural instinct. It's things that they like to do. It allows them to get away from other birds in the pecking order. I can go on and on. But, you know, having some sort of setup, and that can be as simple as even a small like mini A-frame that's just got some slats on the side of it. You know, you see here we use stumps and different things. If you are using stumps, it's just important every like 6 months to a year to change them out and give them some new ones, you know, because there can be mites and bacteria and other things that can live in those stumps. And so it helps to give them fresh things every so often. The other thing that I want to talk about that I think is really important is around supplemental heat. We do not use heat in our coops at all. And, you know, I highly recommend not using heat in your coops. As long as you are purchasing breeds that are cold hardy, which the majority of ones that are being sold at feed stores and other things around this area are, the chickens are good on their own. And the only thing that happens when we provide supplemental heat to them is it doesn't allow their body to naturally produce the heat that they need. And say your electricity goes out or something happens and that light goes off, your chickens are not acclimated to the cold at that point. And that's when you start getting issues like frostbite or having chickens die from the cold. You know, so really the only time you should be using supplemental heat is on baby chicks. And once your birds have feathered out, which is usually anywhere from 10 to 14 weeks, depending on the chicken and the bird, we don't use heat anymore. One tip I can give you is when it gets really below zero, sometimes we'll use a little bit of Vaseline on the combs and wattles of our chickens to help create a barrier to protect against getting frostbite on the tips of their combs. That can happen. So it's important to understand that chickens stay warm because they have downy feathers that are close to their body, and that's how they trap air and keep it warm against their skin. So in colder weather, you'll see a lot of times the chickens puff themselves out, and that's how they're trapping the air on their body that's warm. And then what they do is they regulate their heat through their feet. So you'll see them tucking a leg up and in. And so that kind of helps them to get their foot nice and warm, because then that circulates through their body and through their system. And so all of that kind of behavior when the weather is cold is perfectly normal and what they should be doing. All right. And you'll see here, so, it's just important to have a nice spot to be able to brood your chickens. Whether that is, you'll see here, this is like a pool that we set up with them in it. I've done plastic bins, boxes, we've done the back of the coop. They just need to have a good access and shavings, water, heat, and they're so adorable. And I will say that one of the things that I think is really important, there we go, is making sure that you handle your birds a lot. It makes life a lot easier when they get bigger, and if you have any issues and you need to address those issues, they're comfortable with you putting hands on them. It doesn't mean that they like it or that they're going to be thrilled about it, but it's just something that they're familiar and comfortable with. I would specifically say this in regards to roosters. Having a rooster that is comfortable with you and friendly with you is so important. So you'll see in the middle here was our old rooster, Albert, who I loved. And I handled him from day one, and he was a huge rooster. But we had a relationship, and that was good. So it allowed us to be able to kind of be on a page together. So, if you are going to have a rooster and keep a rooster, being hands-on with them when they're little, I think really helps. So as I said before, with roosters, you just need to be prepared. Roosters can be aggressive. Their job is to help protect their flock. And so it's understanding and respecting their boundaries at the same time. There's a lot of pros to having a rooster. They help keep your flock in line. They help keep your flock safe. But they also can cause some havoc. They can overmate your chickens. And you'll see here, I had to make these weird little saddles for my chickens years ago because Vlad on the right over here, he was really into trying to breed everybody all the time, and he just was ripping their backs apart. So, I think it's important to know that this can happen. And if you don't want roosters, you need to have a plan, okay? Because putting a rooster on Craigslist is not a great plan. And when you get chicks from feed stores, yes, they try and vent sex them and make sure that they are all females, but I can tell you that that does not always happen. And so I'm looking at the time right now, and it's 6:18, so I'm going to just slide through this slide really quick, and I should be done in about 2 minutes, and then we can do some questions. So the last thing that I think is important for folks to think about is diseases. It's really nice and to think about idyllic chicken keeping, and that if we do a lot of natural stuff for our chickens, that they're going to stay healthy forever. But there's this thing called wild birds that live in the world, and unless you are able to completely keep them away from the areas that your chickens are going to be, which if you figure that out, let me know, you are going to possibly have diseases, no matter how healthy you keep your birds. So one thing I like to say is make sure you always keep a care kit on hand so that if a chicken gets sick or injured, you have things there to be able to help them. Blue Coat is really wonderful. It's an antiseptic spray that has some coloring in it so that the chickens don't peck at each other. Some rubber gloves, some electrolytes on hand. You can also use sugar water, but I like to have the packets because who has time to do that when you're in the middle of trying to help a chick that's injured? I have a bucket to be able to fill with water if I need it. I have neem oil. I just try and put that all together and have it in the coop so that it's ready to go. And as I said before, having an area to be able to isolate birds that are sick. So what kind of things can chickens have, and what can they get into? Mites. So as you'll see up here, scaly leg mites, regular mites. Those are things that can happen. Again, DE, clean litter, plenty of places to dust bath can help with that. We use neem oil when we do have, mite problems that have come about over the years. The picture of me in the middle is with a gloved up, greased up finger because I had a chicken with a prolapse vent hole that needed to be pushed back in. The picture on the right is thrush, which is actually a really simple, just staph kind of infection that chickens can get. And a really easy way to kind of get them back on track is to isolate them and give them some water that's got garlic and apple cider vinegar in it, and some yogurt, and it helps kind of get their systems back. The bottom right-hand one is farva, which is a athlete's foot or ringworm for chickens, and that usually just clears itself. So understanding basic anatomy, understanding that problems can happen, and understanding that there's lots of forums out there of people that can help talk you through when stuff goes wrong. But you need to be prepared for this, and if you're not prepared to handle this yourself, then you need to be prepared to be able to take your bird to a vet, or if your bird is really sick and needs to be put down, you need to be ready to be able to do that or to be able to take it somewhere to have that done. So as I said, we use DE, apple cider vinegar, garlic, and our water is a great thing to help with keeping birds healthy. We use herbs to be able to keep our chickens healthy as well. We feed them to them, we put them in the nest boxes, and that is really helpful. And then the last little thing is just making the most out of your chickens. They can do a lot for you. They can help clear compost. They can do pest control. They can convert your food waste. And I think one of the biggest things is that, chicken eggs that you've got fresh off of the wonderful land that you are keeping them on are so much more filled with protein. They have less saturated fat and more vitamin A. They typically have 3 times more vitamin E. There's lots of really cool studies out there about this. And you can see the picture below is a regular conventional egg from the grocery store on the left, and a wonderful free range egg on the right. And they just have really beautiful colored yolks. So again, I said compost turning, land clearing. I let them just go nuts because I'm a really lazy composter, and they make my job a lot easier in making sure that things are getting turned over. And here they are under our apple trees, pecking at the dropped apples that have pests in them, and that is really wonderful as well. And here is some hands of dirt before and dirt that's been composted with chicken poop. So I think there's just a lot of ways that you can utilize chickens. And so that is a very high level overview of chickens, and I'm happy to get a little bit deeper into stuff for the last few minutes.
Thanks, Kirby. One question is, how do you treat chickens with bumblefoot?
Oh, bumblefoot. Yes. So bumblefoot is a staph infection that happens in the bottom of a chicken's foot. And you'll have seen in that first picture there, I had a chicken that was wrapped up in a towel. So typically if you wrap chickens up in a towel, they just don't squawk around as much. But bumblefoot, it's really important that you get that sanitized and cleaned out, and then using whether it is tweezers or a small scalpel or knife to be able to really cut and pull out what's going to look like a scab on the bottom of their foot, because you want to get that completely removed out so that the infection is able to heal. And then you can treat that with alcohol, peroxide, etc., and keep an eye on them. I've had some that have gotten infected to the point where we've needed to treat with antibiotics. So, again, these are things that can happen, and, you just need to have a plan or someone that that you can talk to, or of avian vet that's around you that, you can bring your bird to if you're not comfortable with some of that stuff. And I will say the internet is such a wonderful place. There are so many videos and so many people on the backyard chicken forums that are always happy to kind of help talk people through that.
Could you touch on vaccines for chickens?
Yes, absolutely. And so one of the big vaccines that you can choose for your young chickens is Marek's. And Marek's disease is a really nasty infection that if your chickens get it, can completely wipe out your coop. We don't use quote unquote any antibiotics or any sort of medicated feeds or that kind of stuff. But we do make sure that our chickens are vaccinated. I think just like we're seeing right now with our public health pandemic that's going on, vaccines are a really important way to help build your chicken's immune systems. They don't have any impact on the eggs or the meat. And so I think those are really great preventative ways to build a healthy, strong chicken from the beginning, so that you're not having to worry about using antibiotics or medicated feeds or some of these other things that they use in larger scale farming.
And I have a few questions about introducing new chickens to an existing flock. What do you recommend?
That's a great question. If you have the availability to have, so say if you've got a small mobile coop, if you've got, say, chicks in a cage, for example, like a dog cage, being able to let those chickens kind of see one another but have some sort of a barrier between them. What we do is we keep our adolescent chicks in the back part of our coop, and so they have access to be able to come into the enclosed run. And what we do is we block that off with some wire poultry netting in there, so that the birds can kind of see each other and get used to each other. And we do that for about a week or so. And then we slowly take that netting down. We do kind of, play referee a little bit and just making sure that as they're integrating into the new flock that there's not folks being picked on a super amount. And sometimes if you have issues with birds that are getting picked on, by removing a bird from the flock for a day or two, sometimes the one that's being the aggressor, and putting them in a dog cage or another area, and then reintroducing them into the flock, resets the pecking order and sometimes can help with that. So that's something that we've used with some of our birds as well. But yeah, you want to do it slow, and you want to make sure that it's being supported and everyone's comfortable, because pecking order is real and they can do some damage.
Someone asked if you vaccinate your hens yourself, or do you take them to a vet?
Most of the places that you purchase hens from will come back. You have the choice of choosing them vaccinated or unvaccinated. And so I would talk to wherever you're getting your birds from, your local feed stores. The majority of the time, the default is to have them vaccinated. So you typically have to ask specifically not to have them vaccinated. And then if you're ordering larger amounts of birds straight from a poultry place where they ship them in the mail to you, you have the option to be able to do that. We do administer our own antibiotics here for like the handful. I think I can count like maybe 3 times that I've had to do that because there's been a serious infection in a chicken. But that's not something that I would necessarily recommend for somebody who's just starting out.
Do you have any recommendations about breeds of birds for people starting out?
I have so many recommendations about breeds, and I wish I put a whole piece on that in the presentation. The first thing I would just say is that variety is the spice of life, and it's wonderful, especially because having variety in your flock, meaning all different types, helps with diseases and all kinds of things. So you may have a breed that for some reason is more susceptible to getting mites, or is a better forager. It just kind of helps too, because as you have like temperatures fluctuate and light fluctuations throughout the season, it helps to have your egg production stay a little bit more steady. Some of my favorite breeds, I love the Aracanas and the Easter eggers. They're just really feisty, wonderful little birds. They produce all kinds of different colored eggs, which is fun to be able to have. I really like speckled Sussex. They're nice and hardy, and they're good layers as well. We've recently gotten some barn holders that I also enjoy. Your kind of standard, your Plymouth Barred Rocks are always hardy and good layers. I really enjoy the Brahma breeds as well, although I did find a little bit with some of their feathers on their feet that they tend to be a little more prone to scaly leg mites, which is where that whole thing started for us. I have to say, really, we're more into having different breeds that we enjoy. If you're looking for breeds that are going to produce a lot, your Rhode Island Reds tend to be really good, solid layers. The sex link chickens tend to be really good layers. We don't have many of those. We also really enjoy the Cochin breeds. Those are just kind of really wonderful, loving birds. And if you're looking to hatch birds out, Cochins tend to be really good mamas. So those are just a few of the breeds that we enjoy, but have fun with it. There's so many out there, and you'll get them. And, you know, there's some people I know that love certain breeds and some that don't. But I think the speckled Sussex, the Aracanas, those are really good breeds when you're starting out. A lot of people love Buff Orpingtons as well. They're not my favorite just because I kind of find them a little bit dopey, but people call them like the golden retrievers of chickens because they tend to be really friendly.
Thanks, Kirby. Thank you again to our sponsors, Black Earth Compost, and for helping us to continue to deliver more of these free resiliency skills online gatherings. If you have suggestions about topics we should cover, you can send them to me directly via email. That's doug@nofamass.org. And next Friday at this time, we'll be hosting Carol Roselle, our education director, and Lydia Civil Irons, host and producer of the NOFA Mass podcast. And we'll be talking all about building brand new raised bed gardens. So you can find out more information about that webinar titled Grass to Garden in Under 3 Hours on our website, nofamass.org/events. Again, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.